It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a part of your workday. And, of course, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, no matter where you're farming, Canada, the U.S., or beyond. It's great to have everybody in this community. Great stuff. Hey, today, in kind of continuing on, we've been talking to market analysts on every Wednesday. Today we're going to talk to Darin Newsom. He's a senior market analyst with Barchart, and we're going to talk about some of this weather rally. What exactly is going on? How is it real? How long will it last? How quickly can it disappear? And how do we navigate through it to make sure that we're taking advantage of what's happening here and what the realities are of all this. So I'm looking forward to having Darin today on the show. Great market analyst. We're also going to hear today from Carlo Dade. He's with the Canada West Foundation. We're going to talk about Carlo's push, and really this is something that he believes very firmly in. Canada needs to have a national trade infrastructure strategy. Now, for some of you, I think you are likely to get hives when you hear national strategy for a number of reasons. Now, Carlo believes very firmly this has to happen. Other countries are doing it, and Canada is losing its competitive advantage by ignoring it and focusing on what he calls shovel-ready projects. So we'll talk to Carlo about that here today on the program. We'll also have time for the top ag news stories of the day. Of course, you can always provide your feedback, your thoughts, your analysis, questions, your criticisms, whatever it is. We'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, across all the different social media platforms. We're on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as TikTok as Real Agriculture. Make sure when you check out our YouTube channel, you hit the subscribe button. Yes. So it's free. Just hit subscribe. Just one click. That's right. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. You know, in prep for the discussion with Carlo here today, I thought a lot about my conversations with him in the past regarding the need for this national strategy on trade infrastructure. And what continues to come to mind is, are we capable of something like that? And as you listen to the conversation with Carlo here today and the why of this and what it could look like, I want you to think about, could we actually do it? And what would it take us to do it? Because we're up against some challenges. We're a vast country. It's a big place. The Canadian Shield feels more like a wall, not just in a physical sense, in a mentality sense. It's an issue for people in the West. We're trying to understand people in the East. People in the East are like whatever prairies at times, and when I say people, I mean politicians. And, you know, I remember being in the Maritimes. I was in PEI going back to, would be January. And, you know, I would say they had some fair criticisms as well. You think that the prairies feel they're forgotten. You think that Central Canada doesn't think they're getting enough attention. Well, the Maritimes, my friends, they've got some real gripes, especially when it comes to logistics and trade infrastructure. It was interesting. A number of different conversations that I had with farmers at that meeting in PEI, they talked about how, like, whenever logistics come up, it's like the West gets all the attention. So the grass, you know, when we look at a topic like this, we tend to think that we're the ones that where we are is the one that's not getting the attention it deserves. So this is a big hurdle. It's a big challenge. And it's going to take real leadership to make all this happen. Now, the other part of this is that there's the whole, especially when we're building something, like, let's be honest, if today you said we're going to build a railway from coast to coast, like John A. Macdonald did back in the 1800s, people would laugh. There is no way that railway is getting built today because of the environmental piece of this equation, which is an important part of the equation. But there would be tremendous pushback from activists, from groups to even consider that as an option. Look at our pipelines, and that's below ground. and some of our challenges to make that happen, to actually have a pipeline. We fight infrastructure. We fight these things. We don't progress on them. And so to think that Canada is going to somehow come up with a national trade infrastructure plan, to be honest, I'm right there with Carlo. I'm not confident that Canada we just don't have it in us. I'm not sure. Let me know what you think about it. Am I being too pessimistic? I want you to hear the conversation with Carlo today, and I want your feedback. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Or, of course, you can find us across all the different social media platforms. Or, as I mentioned, you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let's take a break, and then we're going to talk to Darin Newsom. We got a weather market. How long will it last? And how do we navigate through it? You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. Let's talk markets. We're now joined by Darin Newsom. He is Senior Market Analyst with Barchart. Darin, great to have you on the program.
Good to visit with you again, Shaun.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I guess when we talk about the markets in a week like this, it's a shortened week due to the holiday in the U.S. on the Monday. But I think everybody's just talking about the weather and how real is this weather market right now?
It's very real. And what makes this one unusual, every year we see some form of a weather market. Usually, I shouldn't say every year because there's no absolutes, but most years we see some form of a weather market. This one just came earlier. Here in the U.S., we saw corn planting actually happen earlier in the season. We had beneficial weather, and so we got the crop in a little bit earlier. So it makes sense that now that it's turned dry here in May, that, it has everyone's attention. The Dees corn alone has rallied, $1.40 more, $1.40, $1.45 off its late May low. So it's a real thing. It's extremely volatile thing. But again, it's nothing unusual. It's again, something that we should expect almost every year.
And I guess, like in any year, like you say, it happens every year in different ways and fashions. And we try to kill the U.S. corn crop, 2 or 3 times in a growing season. Uh-huh. From a marketing standpoint, how do you view farmers should be navigating through this all of a sudden? I don't want to say reversal because I'm talking that sounds like I'm going into technicals, but we kind of got a bit of a reversal of momentum here a little bit. So how should producers be navigating through that from a marketing perspective?
Well, it's interesting you bring up reversals because that's exactly what we're seeing. I mean, we can go back to May of 2022 when the market as a whole, the corn market as a whole, reversed into a long-term downtrend. And so we rode that market down. Now, that gave us the whole way up over the spring of 2022. It gave us opportunities to get some 2023 and 24 locked in, as well as selling some 2022. So a lot of producers do have that done. And then we got to the end of May, and we didn't quite complete a bullish reversal on the monthly chart, but we did on the weekly chart. And that's where we are right now. We're in week 5 of what's usually a 6-week reversal pattern. And what's happened here in the U.S., where we have the government insurance number coming in at like 591, for so long we were below that price, but now we're back above it. So producers can pick and choose. If they want to sell a little bit more, use this rally to their advantage, they can. I wouldn't do it all because, again, we have no idea how high this market might want to go. Again, maybe it lasts 6 weeks. Maybe it comes to an end here at the end of June, and that's certainly going to set up the stage for a very interesting June 30th session. But we don't know how high it wants to go, but we can certainly feed it as it's rallying.
Yeah, because what would happen? It's a weather market, so it's not. The issue here is, all of a sudden, a rain in the right spot, depending on which side of the equation you're on here, but a rain in a couple counties in Iowa, or maybe more importantly, some rain around Chicago, and all of a sudden, we've got some bearish pressure. Correct? So
exactly,
yeah.
The weather markets are also called supply-driven markets. Everyone's afraid of a short supply situation, and these are short-lived. As you said, a cloud forms, or we get an unexpected rain, or even a forecast of rain. I was looking at the extended forecast. There's a possibility of some rain moving across the Midwest this coming weekend. So, any of these things could be the trigger that that all of a sudden brings this to a halt. That's just how weather markets act. Now, if we want to get a little deeper into it, literally, the soil moisture situation across the U.S. Midwest is still showing deficits. The readings are still showing deficits. So to me, that's key, because that's where we really have to see some improvement before we can say, okay, looks like the crop's going to do a little bit better. Right now, it's hot and dry. Even the rains that are coming through aren't changing the soil moisture readings all that much. So, underneath the ground, I don't think the situation is going to change. But it's what's really key here. So the fundamentals of the market will stay as they are. But the key is, what do the funds do? Right now, they're buying. They've moved from a net short position into a net long futures position, and they're continuing to add to it. We get a change in the forecast. All of a sudden, everyone starts talking about El Nino bringing more precipitation to the Midwest. They're going to start selling again. They're going to move their money to another market sector. That's just kind of how the game is played.
Yeah, how are you viewing wheat right now? We got a bit of a mixed bag in the Western Canadian prairies, depending on where you are. I happen to be in southern Alberta, where it's still really brutally dry. We got foot tall wheat that's trying to head out. Doesn't look very good, but there are good pockets for sure. I've been to Montana several times. Crops looking pretty good there in certain parts, definitely better than it has in the past number of years. The winter wheat crop through Kansas, Nebraska. We've talked about the challenges a lot through the season there. How are you viewing wheat right now?
Again, if we go back to what the market's telling us, we know that the Kansas City hard red winter market, what that takes into account what's going across the Southern Plains, is still quite bullish. I mean, those spreads are inverted. The commercial side's still concerned about supplies. So right now we know that crop's probably going to come up much shorter than what was expected. It's getting rains now, which is the ironic thing. Harvest is being delayed a bit by rain. Hadn't rained there for years, and all of a sudden it's raining during harvest. So that's slowing it down a little bit. Spring wheat, again, similar situation. There was so much snow across the northern plains that planting was pushed back. So again, we still see, if we look at the Minneapolis future spread, some bullish situations where commercial traders are concerned about the crop. Not as much as they are the hard red winter crop. Now over in soft red winter across the Midwest, that's almost a bearish situation, and it has been for a long time. What's really been surprising here is that this whole situation over in Europe and the Black Sea area hasn't really done anything for the Chicago soft red winter wheat market. The U.S. has not seen an increase in demand. Wheat exports are still very slow. Other parts of the world have seen better crops, Australia, parts of Europe, and so on. They've seen better crops. And so certainly they've taken advantage of the situation where the U.S. has largely been left out. So I think it's a mixed bag when we look at wheat. Certainly some concern still for hard red spring and hard red winter, where the soft red winter market, not as much.
In wheat demand, you mentioned the softness in the export side of the equation. What's going on with wheat demand? What should we be watching out for there?
Yeah, again, a lot of it comes down to exports, and the U.S. just simply isn't in the game right now. Otherwise, then there was always, okay, so we were going to move wheat into feed demand. Well, if we look at where the U.S. feed demand is the strongest across the Southern Plains, that's also where we didn't have any wheat. We didn't have any wheat and we didn't have any corn. So we didn't see that theoretical replacement that's so often talked about. So, we haven't seen a great deal, a spike in feed demand. We don't have much export demand going on. It's just a real quiet time now. And again, when we break this thing down, we've got supply markets, which is what we're seeing in corn and soybeans, and we've got demand markets where if you don't have the demand, regardless of what's happening with supplies, it's just hard to get the markets to move. And that seems to be where wheat is stuck at this point until something changes on the demand side.
Yeah, every Wednesday, or we've been trying to every Wednesday on the radio show, RealAg Radio, trying to talk to a different market analyst. And I would say that over the past 2 months, there's been a lot of sell the rally. A lot of concern about what, say, Dees corn looks like when we get to the fall. Mm-hmm. In this week, the third week of June, are you a sell the rally kind of guy, or how do you feel about it?
If I'm taking a view as a business person and I'm in farming as a business rather than a hobby, I'm going to sell a little bit. I'm going to sell this rally a little bit because if it probably puts the crop at a profitable level, even with increased input costs. And that's what we have to look at. Can we pay ourselves at the end of the day if we sell some corn here? But I don't want to sell it all. Yeah. Again, future spreads are bullish. It's telling us that long-term, or at least intermediate-term fundamentals are still bullish, this market. And so there is still some upside potential. But we have to be careful because this thing will top out. And it will top out as soon as the weather changes and we actually see the effects of El Nino. So that'll give us a better opportunity, presumably, to get some 2023, 24. Some might even go out and look at the 25 and get some locked in off this rally.
Yeah, it's not a sell it all kind of market, but it's also not a put it in the bin and just, because it's going to go up every day. That's not the reality either, like it was, say, 2 years ago.
Exactly. Again, we're deep into this at this point. We do see a long-term weather change, or at least the meteorologists still that I follow still see a long-term weather change, and that's what changed the fate of Brazil. I mean, they'd gone through 2 or 3 years of lower production because of La Nina, and all of a sudden it went to El Nino, and they were rewarded with a record crop, reportedly, this past winter. So that could happen here in the United States as well. We just have to make that transition from point A to B.
Yeah. Final question, Darin, I'll let you go, is oilseed demand. The veg oil market, of course, Western Canada, 20 plus million acres of canola. The soybean crop, obviously a very important staple for U.S. growers. How do you feel about the veg oil complex right now?
It's been very impressive. And what I've really been watching is it's been coming from the old crop market more than anything. Tuesday, we saw canola just skyrocket. Soybeans followed along. Then overnight, we saw soybean meal, moving higher, and soybean oil here in the U.S. kind of taking a bit of a hit. So I'm still bullish. The oilseed sector as a whole, I still like the markets. I still think if we look at the spreads, again, across the board, they're still telling us that the commercial side's concerned. There's still very strong demand. And here in the U.S., we're still talking about increased crush demand for bean oil. Haven't really seen it play out that much, but it is supposedly coming. And, canola, demand for canola oil and rapeseed oil, that's still quite strong on the global front.
We're having this interview before we get the EPA announcement on our RVOs. A lot of people in the renewable diesel market, these crushers you're talking about, paying close attention to it. Whatever EPA decides here, will it have much impact on the trade?
It could. Again, it could have that knee-jerk reaction to the market when those numbers come out. I think everyone kind of takes the EPA. I mean, what are they, 2-3 years late with this now? I've kind of forgotten where we are at this point. But the market, if we look at how the market's reacting, if we look at where the money's flowing, that pretty much should tell us what we can expect from any government announcement. So, we'll see what happens when the numbers actually come out.
Darin Newsom of Barchart. Darin, great analysis. Really appreciate it. We got to do this more often. Really appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks so much. It was enjoyed the conversation, Shaun.
I think I said this last week that this is the kind of market where we need to be paying a little bit closer attention. I don't think we can sort of take our eye off the ball because we're spraying to not pay attention to what's happening with some of the pricing action, because things are changing here on a relatively short-term basis based on what the weather is telling the market to do. And as we have those funds stepping in and starting to buy, there's a little bit of momentum there. If you walk away for a month, you may have totally missed an opportunity. So I think, there's times where we can walk away and not pay attention and sort of like, well, I'll come back to it in a month or 2 months or 3 months, or, tell me when the price is X. I'm not sure if that's this kind of market. That's my opinion. Everybody's got a different strategy, and I don't actually have inventory. I've got sort of pretend inventory as we talk to some of these analysts. So, great perspective there from Darin. And we'll see what happens with some of the weather forecasts here in the next 10 days to 2 weeks. And if there's some carry forward here, if this can last a little bit for a while, or is this sort of a short-term blip, we will have to see and continue to look closely at this market action. Let's take a break. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Boron is an essential micronutrient for plant growth, and without boron, your crops can't absorb the macronutrients they need for higher yields. Although borates occur naturally, boron deficiency is a common soil problem. Whether in direct soil application, through fertigation, or as a foliar spray, US Borax has the right refined product for your crops. US Borax products are specifically formulated to combine with other fertilizers, lowering your application costs. Learn more at borax.com/ag.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from realagriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on realagriculture.com. Throughout the year on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, realagriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Got a little bit of time right now for some of your feedback. Got a call to the RealAg feedback line talking about, it was a conversation that we were having on the RealAg Issues panel, kind of out of nowhere, about the school year. And historically, how the school year was kind of tied to when the farming activities had to happen. That's why we had July and August off in Canada. We got this call to the feedback line talking about some of the experiences and what happens during harvest on the island.
Hey, it's Travis Kumsky calling from random Prince Edward Island. Just heard some of the banter on the Friday evening show about the school year being based loosely on the growing season. Anyway, Shaun mused, what about harvest? Was the kids go back to school just about the time that harvest would start? On Prince Edward Island, up until about the 60s, there was a 2-week break where the kids in the end of October, where the kids would be off school, would go back to school September until late October, and then they'd have 2 weeks off to harvest the potatoes. So I guess that's how they got the harvest in. Anyway, just thought I'd share this little bit of history. It kind of made me laugh when he asked that. Have a good one. Bye.
Appreciate that phone call, Travis. And of course, you can be just like Travis on any topic and call the RealAg feedback line at 855-776-6147. Got a message here from Cam, and I believe Cam is in Saskatchewan. And he heard me talking about based on the May results of our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, where it shows that not only are farmers bearish on the market going forward, they've also seen a real erosion of their confidence in their marketing plan in terms of how to approach this market. And to me, I stated on the show that I think that's actually more concern than the market fall in general, right? Confidence is an important component of this. Cam says, hard to have marketing confidence with grain companies trying to punish you in drought years. Trust is lost in the system. The grain companies are not your partner after what happened in 2021. Appreciate that message, Cam. Yeah, I've heard that from a number of people and we talk about the hangover of 2021 and what happened. Interestingly enough, we do have an interview with Ian Boxall, the president of APAS from Saskatchewan, that is going up on RealAgriculture.com. He's talking about we need to have standardization of contracts. Now, some things can be negotiated, but it's time for the federal ag minister to really push the Grain Commission to get involved, and we need to have standardized grain contracts. That may be something that you want to provide your feedback on. Is that something that you want to see? APAS is pushing for it. RealAg on the weekend, this weekend, we're going to play that Ian Boxall interview on the show, so something definitely to check out. But what do you think about standardized grain contracts? Is that something that's missing? Would that give you more confidence in trying to market your crop at this time in the year? And as we heard earlier from Darin Newsom from Barchart, there's definitely some opportunities here for the weather market. And so the question is, let's say you're a little bit in a drier area. I'm based on what many of you have told me, I'm not sure that we're going to see a real influx of people trying to take advantage of some of these blips higher for the same reasons. They're concerned about moisture levels, and because we don't have a lot of grain producers using things like puts, for example. We're kind of stuck in this. In order to take care of risk, we're using either crop insurance and or production contracts with grain companies. And that's why we're in this kind of predicament that we are a little bit, I think. So anyway, Cam, thanks for the message. Really do appreciate it. And send me your thoughts. Do you think it's time for there to be a standardized grain contract created that, as APAS says, evens out the playing field? It sort of it changes the narrative where all of the risk isn't on the farmer. It's a little bit what Ian says, a little bit more fair for the farmer. Let me know. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to hear from Carlo Dade of the Canada West Foundation. We're talking about trade, infrastructure, and a national plan. What's he talking about? You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
I love talking about trade, and there's the trade component, but there's also the process that allows us to have good trade outcomes. And one of the processes is logistics and having the infrastructure and able to get product from the middle of the prairies, for example, or from central Canada to the coast, or prairies to the port in Vancouver. We require logistics because we're a big bloody country. The U.S. has the same sort of issues, but the river system is definitely an additional option that we don't really have, for sure, in Western Canada, at least. Here to talk about the need for Canada to potentially have a national trade infrastructure plan is Carlo Dade of the Canada West Foundation. Carlo, great to have you back on the program.
Shaun, always great to be with you.
Those of you that are watching on video, that's a really nice hat there, Carlo. I like that.
Yeah, I managed to lift it off of some guy named Shaun at a conference in Ottawa, I think, when he wasn't looking.
Very, very comfy looking. Very comfy looking. Okay, Carlo, one of the things that wanted to chat with you about today is a topic that probably doesn't live in the forefront of everybody's mind on a daily basis, but long term is really, really critical. And that is the need for strategic trade infrastructure. From your viewpoint at Canada West Foundation, do you feel that Canada is well equipped from a trade infrastructure standpoint going forward?
We have the basis, and 10 years ago, we had an even better basis and reputation globally for our ability to move goods in and out of the country. So a decade ago, Canada was ranked in the top 10 of the World Economic Forum rankings on infrastructure, transport infrastructure and trade infrastructure. But the last time the rankings were released in 2019, we had dropped to 32nd globally, right above Azerbaijan. So you've seen a decade-long decline in the perception globally of the quality of our trade infrastructure. And a decade-long decline is not one bad harvest. It's not one flood. It's not one strike at the port. It's not one bad winter. It's a symbol of a systemic problem. And we've seen other countries improve their rankings of their perception while we've dropped. So this indicates that no, we've lost our ability to manage the long-term investments, the long-term design of our trade infrastructure to make it competitive globally. And if you can't move it, you can't sell it. And increasingly, folks are telling us, and just real quickly, just this past week, the World Bank's rankings on port efficiency had Port of Vancouver second to last. No Canadian port ranked out of the bottom 1/3. So we certainly have issues, and it's not something that happened last week, and it's not one port. It's a systemic problem. So the answer is what our competitors do, which is national planning, taking an approach to look at the entire system, which we don't do.
Okay, so when you say national planning, can we actually do that effectively, or does that just bog this down so it becomes this bureaucratic mess and we don't actually advance? When you say we have to have a national plan, what else has to be wrapped around that in order for us to do that effectively?
A lot of things, but I would start with the fact that we have a national system for moving goods. We think of the Western Gateway, the Pacific Gateway, or Central Canada, focused primarily on moving goods down to the States. But the reality is we have integrated supply and production chains. We have integrated logistics systems that move across the country. The railroads move across the country. If you make changes to one part of the system, it impacts other parts of the system. Businesses trying to move goods out of Western Canada, say timber, are impacted by changes in other assets, road, rail, not just rail infrastructure, but road infrastructure in other parts of the country. The system is linked. And if you look at trying to whack-a-mole and just put one problem down, you can inadvertently create problems in the other parts of the system. So it's national in that you have the system, and the only way to deal with a system like that is by taking a large view. So national basically reflects a reality that we have an integrated supply and production system, an integrated logistics system where what happens in one part impacts the other. You can use the word national, you can use the word systemic, whatever you want, but that's the reality of our system.
Who has to lead this process? Is this something that's federal government led, or is this something that needs to be led by industry, taking it to the powers that be?
It has to be all parties working together. And we spent 10 years at Canada West looking at international best practice. How do the Australians, the Americans, the Europeans, Malaysia, how do other countries manage their systems? And what you see is a national process led by the government, but with private sector participation, a private sector voice, a private sector seat at the table. Trade infrastructure, as opposed to wastewater systems or schools or parks, is an asset class of infrastructure where the private sector is often the majority owner, majority operator, majority user. The private sector has unique proprietary business information about how the system works, about how one change will impact other parts of the system. So you have to have the private sector participating. This is international best practice. You also in Canada need the provinces and municipalities at the table. So the government has, you can say, leadership role, or you can say convening role in bringing everyone together, but everyone has to be at the table and everyone has to participate.
Are we underfunded? Is this a money problem, or is this an idea or organizational problem?
Both, but you can't put the cart before the horse. You need the horse to lead the cart. And you can't spend money unless you know where to spend to get the greatest return on investment, where to spend where you won't cause problems in other parts of the system, how to do a long-term planning process. These assets are 30 years, 20 years, 30 years. You need a process that goes that long. So before you fixate on the money and spend money to potentially make the problem worse, even though you think you're solving a problem, you've got to get that down. But in answer to your question, yes. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development publishes data on what countries spend on inland transportation infrastructure as a percent of that country's GDP. Canada ranks below the OECD average. We are, of the economies looked at, we're way down on the end of spending well below the OECD average. I think we spend 1/4 of what, say, Australia spends, and we spend less than the Americans, and certainly much less since the Americans have upped theirs. So as a percentage of GDP, yes, we're down. What that exact figure is, you're not going to know till you have long-term national planning that makes sense.
Okay, Carl, what I don't understand here is how we got to this point. So we have a very vast country from a geographical standpoint. So when we talk about trade infrastructure, we're not only talking about export markets, we're also talking about interprovincial trade and how some of this infrastructure would actually facilitate a little bit more interprovincial trade if we, make sure the regulations are running and humming at the proper sync level. How do we get to this point with us being so trade reliant and, so much of our GDP comes from exports, how did we let this slip where we're in this position like we are today? Because the alternative is not really ideal.
It's a good question. We've been so focused on digging out of the hole, the 10 years of research convening, that we didn't look too much at how we got into the hole. But certainly, when we had the Asia-Pacific Gateway, Canada was ranked in the top 10. When it became clear, I think, to foreign customers and folks in Canada that we weren't going to continue that, when we weren't taking that strategic planning element, that long-term strategic planning element, at least for the Pacific Corridor, we started to slip a little bit. But I think it's also deeper. We've evolved to reward short-term thinking. We've evolved to reward ribbon cutting, shovel ready. So our report on this is from shovel ready to shovel worthy, how to dig out of the hole we're in. Yep. I think we moved to that shovel ready ribbon cutting. We reward politicians and we reward a system that gives us something bright, new, and shiny, where we're whacking the mole that just popped up. There is no reward for taking a longer term view. There is no reward for a politician to invest in long-term planning for a project where the opposition will cut the ribbon, or a politician not yet born will cut the ribbon. So we've really, in terms of from the government side, but also from the electorate that rewards politicians, we've devolved, I think, into this short-term focus. And, shovel ready means that you've admitted failure. Shovel ready means that you haven't done the work to have shovel ready projects ready to go. It means that you're willing to take a short-term boost to workers going out over investment. And we've just devolved in our thinking to accept that as a good thing. And if you think about it, it's really bizarre that you could think of shovel ready as being a good thing and not shovel worthy.
What do you include as trade infrastructure? Ports, railways, roads, inland hubs, rural broadband a component of that potentially, or broadband in general? Like what all would you include in that spoke?
So it's a good question. It's one that we kind of take for granted. Everyone has a vision in their head. But if you step back, it's the assets, so the physical assets, and the systems, so information, knowledge, rules, regulations, that move goods, people, money, and ideas in and out of the country. So in Canada, we move a lot of commodities. So our first thought are the systems and assets, ports, also airports, roads, rail that move goods in and out of the country. But in trade and services, it's the movement of people that's very important. Trade and services, tourism, education, financial consulting. That's the movement of people. So you look at the efficiency of airports, ideas, rural broadband, enabling ideas and information to move in and out of productive farm areas or agricultural areas is a component. But obviously for us, the big chunk is moving goods. But as you think about the future of trade, you think about trade and services and moving people, and you think about systems for moving ideas and information. These are all parts of what we consider trade infrastructure.
On this topic, are the Americans any better at this than us, or are they in the same doldrums of short-term thinking and missing the long-term picture?
I think the Americans also suffer from short-term thinking, as do most of our competitors. The difference is they've managed to put in place other systems to engender longer-term thinking and longer-term planning. Certainly the investments, the massive financial investments that the Biden administration is making is going to have long-term consequences. You're talking about serious money going out over a long-term period of time that will if successful in gender planning, will engender coordination. We just haven't seen the same movement in Canada.
Carlo, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it. Important topic, and we'll continue to have the conversation with you. Appreciate it very much.
Hey, if I could get one last word in for agriculture. You're not going to solve the individual problems that the agricultural community and producers face until you solve the larger problem. You can continue to play whack-a-mole with rail and other issues as they pop up, or you can have a better chance of solving these issues or mitigating them with a long-term approach.
Long-term approach needed indeed. Thanks a lot, Carlo. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Shaun.
As I said earlier on the show, I want your feedback. Can we actually do we have the will to do what Carlo is talking about? Let me know your thoughts. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. When we come back, we'll get to the top ag news stories of the day.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I want to encourage everybody to make sure that you're a subscriber to our daily emails that come out. It goes right to your inbox for free and keeps you up to date on the things that you really need to be paying attention to when it comes to the current environment in agriculture, whether that's markets, agronomy, machinery related, policy related. We got you covered here at Real Agriculture, and the simple way to sign up, if you have not done so, realagriculture.com/subscribe. That's realagriculture.com/subscribe. Great stuff. Okay, let's get to the top ag news stories of the day here today. A lot to cover. So the federal government lifts pause on pesticide MRL reviews while banning cosmetic pesticides on federal land. Ministers representing Health Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada shared the multi-pronged announcement on Tuesday as part of the government's larger agenda to update pesticide rules and the Pesticide Management Regulatory Agency. MRLs are used as a standard for trade and to ensure crop protection products are being used properly. Prior to pausing MRL reviews in 2021, Canada's MRL standards were regularly updated to reflect scientific findings and align with the international codex standards recognized by other countries. Going forward, MRL reviews are resuming with an increased focus on biodiversity and species at risk, according to the government officials. The government says the increased focus on biodiversity and the ban on cosmetic pesticide use on federal lands are a part of reaching Canada's international commitment in the 2022 Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which includes a target of reducing overall pesticide risk, not necessarily the amount used, by 50% by 2030. Yeah. Okay. So that gets your attention there. So my reaction to this is a little bit of confusion. We talk about believing in the science, yet the science is telling us that we need to get rid of cosmetic pesticide use on federal lands. I'm not sure those two things really add up that much. Bloomberg reports that the EPA in 2023 will require the use of 2.82 billion gallons of biomass-based diesel, generally made from soybean and canola oil, just 2.2% increase over the 2.76 billion gallons mandated last year, but no increase from the level proposed in December. For 2024, indications are the agency will increase the level to 3.04 billion gallons and 3.35 billion gallons in 2025. Okay, a lot of reaction. Saw the U.S. canola producers upset about the decision, and there wasn't an increase to the proposed rule. Reaction from Pro Farmer: the bio-based requirements are well below the increase sought by producers who warned the White House that recent surges in U.S. production warrant much higher targets and that multi-billion-dollar investments in renewable diesel capacity hang in the balance. The EPA failed to fully consider data demonstrating an upward trajectory for biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable fats and oils, according to Kurt Kovarik, Vice President of Federal Affairs for the Clean Fuels Alliance America. He said that in response to the reported targets. Clean Fuels criticized that the EPA's decision for not supporting the industry's goals and not considering the rapid growth in U.S. biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel production is a concern. The EPA's final rule increases RFS volumes for these fuels by only 590 million gallons over the 3-year period, despite data from the first half of 2023 showing a significant increase in qualifying biomass-based diesel production compared to the same period in 2022. So these are the RVOs that we have been waiting for. We'll see if this creates any cause for concern when it comes to the investment community, as some of these farm groups and industry associations are alleging that if this number wasn't increased, there would be a sort of a pause from the investment angle. We'll have to see if that does play any sort of role. $1.9 billion sustainable aviation fuel facility planned for Portage La Prairie in Manitoba. Speaking of renewable diesel, plans have been announced for a $1.9 billion sustainable aviation fuel SAF production facility to be built west of Portage La Prairie in Manitoba. The facility that Azure Sustainable Fuels Corp intends to build is projected to produce 1 billion liters of SAF annually with canola or soybeans as feedstock. It would be the first of its kind in Canada. Manitoba Premier Heather Stephenson and Agriculture Minister Derek Johnson joined Azure CEO Douglas Cole and municipal leaders in Portage on Tuesday, where they announced the $2.9 million in FedProv funding over the next 2 years to support Azure with a front-end engineering and design study. Now, this is a Calgary-based company, and it's aiming to have construction begin in 24, with production ramping up around 2027. So a little bit away, but all of this ties into some of what we were just talking about with those RVOs, right? It's spurring that investment, and the industry wanted to see those requirements to be higher. The Kremlin stands by its position that there are no grounds for extending the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Does it feel like we've already been here before? It does, doesn't it? They believe that the whole agreement has essentially failed. The future of the initiative remains uncertain as conflicting interests persist. It feels like this is just sort of like a record on repeat. The first standalone renewable diesel refinery to begin production in BC. So Tidewater Renewables has completed construction on Canada's first standalone renewable diesel refinery. The company says production will begin at Prince George, BC facility very soon. And they announced the completion of the project will on last Friday, June 16th. So the plant is expected to produce more than 3,000 barrels of fuel a day, or about 170 million liters a year once it's fully operational. So a good-sized facility indeed. Ontario is set to launch the Agri-Food Careers Initiative. A 3-year, 2-phase, $1.7 million Ontario initiative is set to promote careers in agriculture through agricultural societies. The Promoting Agri-Food Careers Initiative was announced by Huron-Bruce MPP Lisa Thompson over the weekend. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can definitely send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, YouTube and Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as, of course, you can find us on TikTok if that's your pleasure, or call the RealAg feedback line. 855-776-6147. We covered a lot of ground today across a number of different topics, and I want your feedback. What are your points of view? What are you concerned about? What are you excited about? Give me your perspective. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll, of course, chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.